They destroy crops, eat pretty much anything they can find, and can transmit swine fever to wildlife and humans alike.
Across the farmlands of Georgia, an unseen battle is raging. Wild boars, fierce and cunning, have torn through fields for years, wreaking havoc and draining farmers' livelihoods. But recently, something began to happen. Hidden traps, secret setups, and high-tech tricks are turning the tables in ways no one expected. Farmers turned their land into a battlefield of strategy, using technology and psychology to outsmart one of the most destructive creatures in America. And the results are nothing short of genius. Join us as we find out how they were able to trick this wild beast and regain control. The trapping strategy. For years, the struggle between farmers and wild boars turned into something far deeper than a battle for crops. It became a test of patience, skill, and understanding. The animals were strong, clever, and restless, always finding a way to destroy what humans built. To truly win, farmers had to think like the enemy. They had to learn how the boars moved, how they searched for food, and what made them lower their guard. Bit by bit, they built a plan that mixed old instincts with modern tools, using every advantage they could find. The first step was always about trust. Farmers began by studying the paths the boars took each night, and the places where they lay hidden during the day. The key was not to scare them off too soon, so they placed bait near resting areas, letting the scent of the food travel slowly through the trees and over the fields. At first, they did not even bother to set traps. The goal was simple: to draw the animals closer, to let them believe that food was safe, easy, and always waiting. It was a game of patience, a slow dance between hunger and habit. Different places demanded different tricks. In dry regions, the scent of fermented corn worked best. In wetter lands, stronger mixtures carried further through the air. Farmers often mixed corn with sugar, fruit-flavored powder, and yeast, letting it rot just enough to release a powerful smell. To humans, it was unpleasant, but to the pigs, it was a promise of a feast. The air itself became a weapon, carrying temptation straight into the dens and hollows where the herds hid. Once they found the bait, they would return again and again, always expecting another meal. Placement mattered just as much as the bait. Some farmers dug deep, narrow holes and poured corn inside so that the boars had to dig for it. Others buried small piles beneath loose soil, forcing the animals to use their strong snouts to root around. Every move was designed to make them stay longer, work harder, and trust the area more. In some spots, farmers filled barrels with small holes, letting the corn spill out slowly. Only one animal could feed at a time, creating competition among the group. The longer they fed, the more likely they were to bring the rest of their herd along the next night. But the real breakthrough came when farmers quit relying on guesswork. Cameras became their eyes in the field. Mounted on posts and trees, they watched through every hour of darkness. They captured every visit, every movement, every snout digging through the dirt. Over time, these images built a map of behavior, a living pattern of how the herds acted. Farmers learned which animals led the group, which ones stayed behind, and which ones avoided anything unfamiliar. This information changed everything. Once the herds began feeding without fear, the next stage began. The traps were no longer random cages hidden in the bush. They were carefully built circles of steel panels, strong enough to hold dozens of animals at once. This time around, the traps were planned with precision, not luck. At first, they remained open so the pigs could wander in and out freely, believing it was safe. The bait stayed inside, drawing them deeper every night. Only when every member of the group felt safe enough to enter did the real moment arrive. Farmers waited, watching the live camera feeds. The sounder, the full group, had to be inside together before the trigger could be used. This patience often took weeks, but it paid off. With one single signal, the trapdoor fell, closing off escape in less than a second. The rush of movement, the pounding hooves, and the frantic grunts would fill the air, but it was too late. The entire group was caught. For the first time, the odds leaned toward the farmers. Meanwhile, technology has changed the game. Systems like Boar Buster and Big Pig Trap allowed people to control everything from their phones or computers. They could be miles away, yet still watch every movement in real time. When the right moment came, one command was enough to shut the trap. This level of control meant that almost every animal could be captured at once, stopping them from breeding and returning. Where older methods might catch a few, these new systems captured almost all. The balance between man and beast had shifted. Still, not every animal was fooled. Some grew suspicious. They hovered near the edges, sniffing, waiting, and then slipping away before danger struck. These cautious survivors were harder to deal with. Farmers called them trapwise. For them, a new plan was needed. Sometimes a smaller bait site was set nearby, just for those individuals. Other times, more direct methods were used. Whatever it took, the goal remained the same. There should be no survivors to rebuild the group. The wild boar was clever, strong, and stubborn, and every mistake gave it an advantage. Yet every success gave the farmers hope that their land could finally breathe again, free from the destruction that would always come each night. It became more than pest control. It became a strategy. Farmers found themselves thinking like hunters, engineers, and psychologists all at once. They built traps like puzzles, where every piece had to fit perfectly. Every capture told them something new. Every failure taught another lesson. The nights grew less predictable, but also more controlled. Under the watchful eyes of cameras, the battle between instinct and invention played out in real time. However, farmers looked out over the land and saw not just survival, but proof of adaptation. Each sounder caught brought the land one step closer to peace. It was not a battle of strength, but of understanding. In the end, the farmer's greatest weapon was not metal or bait, but knowledge, one that grew from watching, waiting, and learning the wild mind of their fiercest enemy. But that was just one method, the night raid. Across the long stretches of farmland, the struggle between people and wild boars had become a game of constant change. As hunting pressure grew heavier each year, the animals began to shift their behavior, molding their instincts to fit a world ruled by human presence. They moved deeper into darkness, finding protection in the unseen hours when the fields turned still and the air cooled. Their survival now depended on avoiding the gaze of humans, and they had learned to use the night as a shield while roaming. Farmers soon discovered that they had to evolve too. They could not rely only on old methods or daylight patrols anymore. They began to bring in advanced tools that worked where the eye failed. And so thermal scopes lit up the fields in a ghostly glow, revealing movement that once went unnoticed. Special rifles, fitted for precision and speed, gave them the reach they needed. What began as a simple defense of crops slowly turned into a technological pursuit. Man against nature, each side learning and adjusting in turn. Wild boars, naturally drawn to the shadows, grew even more nocturnal as human disturbance filled their days. They hid as soon as sunlight touched the land, curling up in thick cover, waiting for the heat to fade. By the time dusk arrived, they stirred, stepping out with care, exploring the fields under starlight. In regions where hunting was fierce, they rarely appeared in the open until deep into the night. Their steps grew softer, their movements timed with the rhythm of darkness. Most activity happened around midnight, the hour when the world seemed to hold its breath and everything stood still. During summer, when the air hung heavy and hot, this pattern deepened. Boars lacked sweat glands, and the daytime sun punished them harshly, so they learned to feed when the land cooled, digging and rooting through soft soil while the rest of the world slept. The darkness gave them not just comfort, but freedom, a space where danger seemed far away. Even the moon became part of their survival game. When it shone bright and high, spreading its silver light across open fields, the animals grew cautious. They moved less, sensing that too much brightness could give them away. On darker nights, when the moon stayed hidden behind clouds, they roamed freely, confident in their cover. It was almost as though they had learned to read the sky, adjusting their habits by the pull of light and shadow. For the hunters who tracked them, darkness was no longer an obstacle but an advantage. Modern devices changed everything. Thermal scopes did not depend on moonlight or luck. They detected heat, drawing bright shapes against the cool backdrop of the land. With these tools, hunters could see a hog's outline even in total blackness. The machines worked long hours, some lasting through an entire night without losing power. From hundreds of yards away, they could pick up movement that the naked eyes can't trace. Most hunters used semi-automatic rifles designed for speed and stability. They needed to act fast because wild hogs moved unpredictably, scattering in seconds when startled. Suppressors softened the sound of gunfire, keeping nearby homes from being disturbed and preventing other animals from bolting too early. It was precision work, planned, timed, and carefully carried out under rules that changed from state to state. Farmers often joined the preparation long before the hunt began. They set up game cameras near feeding areas, tracked footprints, and studied feeding times. When they noticed repeated activity, they reached out to hunters who specialized in night operations. Coordination mattered more than luck. Some regions now allowed hunting all year round, giving landowners freedom to act whenever the damage grew too severe. Others limited it, setting boundaries on equipment and hours, reminding everyone that even control of nature required balance. For the people working those lands, this shift was not just about protection. It was about endurance. Every destroyed crop, every torn fence, every ruined patch of soil carried a cost. They could not afford to lose the race against animals that never stopped learning. So they studied the boars just as carefully as the boars studied them. They stayed patient, building strategies layer by layer, fusing ancient understanding of animal behavior with the innovation of modern science. Each night became a contest of intelligence and timing. The farmers watched from a distance, the hunters moved through fields with care, and the wild boars slipped between rows of crops, unaware that their cover had grown thin. The cycle would start again the next night, both sides adapting, both refusing to give up. For now, humanity had the edge, using tools and coordination to reclaim the land. Yet the wild still pushed back, teaching anyone who watched closely that survival was a race that never ended. Seasons of the hunt. Farmers who had spent many years working the land often found that wild boars were never easy to deal with. Every region had its own pattern, and every season brought new surprises. The animals changed the way they moved, fed, and bred, forcing people to stay alert and change their ways too. Every farmer who wanted lasting control had to learn how to read both the land and the animals. Some learned fast, while others watched their crops vanish year after year. Experience became the only real teacher, and those who failed to adapt were left to start again. In winter, from late December to late March, the struggle reached its peak. During this time, hunger pushes the wild boars out of their comfort zones to search far and wide, moving into open fields where farmers had laid out bait. That was when the advantage shifted. Farmers who had prepared well started setting up strong trapping systems, drawing whole sounders into enclosed spaces. It's usually a hard, cold season, but one that offers the best chance to bring the numbers down. The traps did more than remove animals. They stopped the next generation before it even began. For a short while, the land breathed. However, it doesn't stay that way for long. As the ice melted and the days stretched out, everything changed. Spring arrived between March and May, and the fields came alive. New crops broke through the ground, and the forests filled with fresh life. Frogs, toads, snakes, and tender roots. The wild boars spread out again, feeding freely. They no longer needed bait. Farmers had to pack away their traps and turn to other ways. That was when night shooting became the main tactic. With the help of thermal imaging and night scopes, farmers moved under the cover of darkness, tracking the hogs that had escaped the winter traps. These survivors were larger, faster, and more careful. Many of them were old boars, males that had avoided danger through instinct. They came out when the world slept, feeding on young plants and tearing through newly planted crops. Though it was harder, this method often reduced the population by another small but valuable margin. By summer, stretching from June through August, everything grew tougher. The heat rose, the ground baked, and only the strongest hogs remained. These were the animals that had learned from their losses. They had seen traps, smelt danger, and learned to keep away from human tricks. Now they relied on memory and instinct, making them much harder to corner. Yet the very heat that strengthened them also weakened them. Pigs could not sweat. They needed water to cool down, and that need gave farmers another way in. So the chase moved to the edges of ponds, creeks, and muddy wallows. Farmers set up trail cameras by these wet spots, building a web of watchful eyes across hundreds of acres. The footage showed where the hogs came to drink, where they rested, and when they moved. It became a slow game of patience. Some days passed without a single sighting, while other days brought entire groups into view. Over time, a pattern formed, and with each new clue, the hunters got closer. The work took long hours and steady nerves, but it taught one truth: patience paid off more than force. Then came fall, from September through November, a season that rarely followed the rules. The weather turned mild, the crops matured, and the forest dropped their bounty of nuts and fruits. Everything changed again. The wild boars spread out to feed, moving between farmland and woodland. This time, one plan was never enough. Farmers had to blend old and new methods. Some used traps where food was still scarce. Others used cameras and rifles where sounders gathered. It was a season of watching, adjusting, and striking when the moment was right. Another challenge came from outside. Deer hunters began filling nearby woods, pushing boar herds toward farmland in search of safer ground. Overnight, new sounders appeared on fields that had just been cleared. It turned into a never-ending cycle. Farmers soon realized that even if they managed to remove every pig one season, fresh groups could wander in from as far as 19 miles away. The fight never truly ended. Every week brought new signs. To stay ahead, farmers had to stay flexible, ready to switch tools, traps, and tactics without delay. By the time the year turned full circle, the experienced ones knew that wild boar control was never about strength alone. It was a matter of observation and timing, of watching how the seasons turned and how hunger or weather pushed the animals to act. Those who thought they could win by force alone often lost more crops than they saved, but those who moved with the rhythm of nature managed to keep the balance. The real victory lay not in removing every hog, but in keeping control through change. Each season taught something. Winter showed the power of hunger. Spring revealed the limits of plenty. Summer proved the value of patience, and fall reminded everyone that nothing stayed fixed for long. Together, they shaped a cycle that repeated year after year. For the farmers who stayed on their land, this battle became more than a job. It became a way to understand life itself. The wild always found a way to return, and those who had learned the game stood ready once more. The old trick that got the job done. After wasting time and money on every modern idea possible, some farmers started to look back instead of forward. They began turning to something their grandparents once used, digging trenches around their fields. The idea sounded too simple at first. How could a ditch do what fences and machines could not? Yet as more people tried it, the results spoke for themselves. The method that had nearly been forgotten started making a comeback in the most unexpected way. It all started with frustration. Fences demanded endless checking. A single gap or loose wire gave the boars their chance. When power went out after a storm, the whole system failed. Hunters and farmers soon realized they were fighting an animal that could adapt faster than any tool they used. Steel traps were supposed to help, but those too became useless once the boars figured them out. When only a few animals were caught, the rest stayed away, learning from what they saw. Each mistake made the next attempt harder. In many regions, farmers gave up on high-tech systems. They were expensive, fragile, and demanded constant effort. Every time one method failed, the animals grew bolder. It was as if nature was showing that cleverness and money alone could not win this battle. Then came the rediscovery of trenches. The concept was basic. Dig a deep ditch around 1 to 1.5 meters, forming a ring around the crops. It created a physical gap that wild boars could not cross. Unlike fences, trenches needed no electricity, no constant repair, and no watching eyes through the night. Wild boars rarely jump over obstacles unless they are forced to. Their instincts push them to move through things instead of over them. So when they come to the edge of a trench, they hesitate. They might try to climb down, but soon they find themselves trapped, unable to scramble back up the other side. Some even slip in and struggle for hours, unable to escape. Bit by bit, farmers gained back their land. They began to sleep better knowing their crops stood a chance. In Brazil, this approach turned into a revolution. Large farms that once lost entire fields in a single night began to see change. Fields that were once wiped clean now stood thriving. In the southern regions, especially places like Sao Paulo, herds of over 200 boars had become a nightmare. They moved like dark rivers through farmland, tearing up soil and chewing down crops in minutes. Yet trenches managed to stop them where electricity and steel had failed. Across the ocean in Texas, the story was much the same. Farmers there faced millions of dollars in damage each year. Boars ruined crops, tore up grasslands, and spread disease. The state spent more than $50 million yearly just trying to manage them. Helicopters, traps, and fences became part of daily life. Yet the animals still thrived. When a few landowners tried trenches, they found something that finally worked. It was as if a simple line in the ground had redrawn the balance between human effort and animal instinct. The idea spread fast. People who had once trusted only machines began to call for excavators and backhoes. They dug wide and deep, circling their fields with ditches that no animal could cross. At first, it looked like extra work. Heavy equipment, fuel, and labor all added up. But as seasons passed, those costs faded in comparison to what the trenches saved. Farmers began to notice other benefits too. Trenches helped with drainage, keeping rainwater from flooding crops. They also acted as boundaries, keeping stray cattle and other wildlife away. The return to trenches showed something deeper than just farming tactics. It reminded people that not every problem needs a modern fix. Sometimes the smartest answer is buried in the past, waiting to be uncovered again. For years, humans chased progress, building stronger fences and smarter devices, but forgot that the ground itself can be a shield. The trenches stood firm through rain and wind, year after year, asking for nothing in return. In time, the landscape changed. From Brazil to Texas, where farmers once lost sleep worrying about their crops, they began to find hope again. They learned that control didn't always come from power or machines, but from knowing how to work with the land itself. By shaping the earth in simple ways, farmers regained control. What began as desperation had turned into renewal, and across several farms, the ground itself now stood as a defender of life and labor. The power of unity. Wild boar control had never been something a single farmer could handle alone. It stretched far past fences and property lines, spilling into nearby lands and even crossing counties and states. One man's effort meant little if his neighbor left the gates open. The problem moved like water through cracks, slipping into every weak spot and filling every gap left unguarded. To fight it, people had to stand side by side. The struggle reached beyond ownership and became a test of cooperation, where every piece of land played a part in the same long battle. It was not just about setting traps or mounting cameras. It was about building a wall of resistance that stretched from one end of a valley to the other. Wild boars crossed rivers, highways, and fences as if those barriers did not exist. A single unprotected property became a doorway through which herds poured back into areas that had just been cleared. When one farmer worked hard, while another ignored the problem, everything fell apart. The effort had to spread evenly, linking every hand and every mind together under one goal: to drive the intruders out and keep them from coming back. Years ago, when a few landowners decided to act together, something began to change. It happened in 2016, when a group joined what was called the Integrated Wild Pig Control Program. Instead of working separately, they shared plans, compared results, and set up their tools in patterns that connected across properties. It turned the entire landscape into one large defense system. The herds that once wandered freely suddenly found no safe path left. They ran into barriers no matter which way they turned. If only a handful of people had joined in, things might have gone differently. The hogs would have slipped away into nearby woods or other farms and started breeding again. They always found a way to survive when pressure came from just one direction. But when every direction was covered, they lost ground quickly. That lesson stood clear. When people moved together, results followed. The animals were strong, but unity was stronger. Those who took part in that effort saw their land begin to heal, and for the first time in years, crops grew without constant damage. The behavior of the hog showed why this unity mattered. When numbers rose too high in one spot, they never stayed still. They scattered and found fresh ground to tear apart. When food ran low or hunters came too close, they slipped through forests or swam across creeks, moving to softer targets. Trail cameras caught their movements, images of the same group feeding in one place one night and then rooting through soil miles away only a few days later. No single person could ever stay ahead of them alone. This pattern turned into a cycle that seemed endless when neighbors worked apart. One farm drove them off, another farm received them. When hunters chased them out of a cornfield, they hid in nearby woods and came back stronger. It became a revolving door of destruction. Only when everyone joined forces did that door begin to close. Cooperation meant fewer hiding spots and fewer chances for the animals to regroup. It turned scattered efforts into a united front that the herds could no longer slip through. Experts had seen this long before and had urged wider control efforts. Some counties began joining forces, and soon even states stepped in. The results were clear. In Illinois, the collaborative feral swine management task force managed to wipe out most of the population in the southern part of the state. Around 95% of the hogs disappeared after coordinated work between farms, agencies, and local groups. Kansas did something similar, erasing 10 separate hog populations by refusing to treat each one as an isolated problem. None of these victories came by chance. They happened because people stopped working in small circles and started thinking on a larger scale. Government agencies joined hands with landowners, sharing information, equipment, and strategy. Each side understood its role, and that understanding created strength. The wild boar problem was not just about the animals, it was about human connection, about people learning how to link efforts across borders and boundaries that once divided them. One more challenge came from transportation. Without strict rules, some individuals had been moving hogs, sometimes even on purpose. This artificial spread made the fight much harder. When captured animals were taken to new places, whether for hunting or other reasons, it ruined months of progress. Some states began to tighten laws, placing bans on movement and enforcing penalties for those caught spreading the problem. These measures helped stop the cycle from spinning further out of control. The issue did not stop at state borders either. Across North America, collaboration proved its worth once again. The United States and Canada began working side by side, sharing knowledge and strategies. Together, they built plans that reached across rivers and mountains, showing that wild boar control could not be limited by geography. In the end, it always came back to the same truth. When people stood apart, the animals thrived. But when they joined hands, the land began to recover. Only by working together could they hold the line and keep it strong. What other methods do you think the farmers should have applied? Let us know your views in the comments. If you enjoyed this video, like and subscribe to this channel. Before you go, watch the other videos on your screen.